Okay, good morning, everybody. I hope everybody had a great Matan Torah, Kabbalah Torah. So we'll go right back into Ayin Beis where we left off. We are in volume 3 in Ayin Beis. We finished the paragraph on page 1326. 1326. Let me sum up what we learned and then we'll just continue from there. Okay. So we entered now on page 1325 into the third level, where he calls Yesh Efen Gimel Bam Tokas Agvuris, a third method or a third type or a third kind of sweetening the Gvuris. And here the Gvuris are sweetened from within, mitzad atzma. Not through chsadim, but something that's inside them in their very personality. And he calls this the ikar hamtoka amitis. This is the primary true sweetening. And when we say ena gvuris nimtoken el b'sharshan, the gvuris are not sweetened only in their root. He's referring to this level of sweetening, the shoshana atzmi. Now, earlier we learned this would be called the helama atzmi, that is the root of gvura in the highest levels, higher than ur. He doesn't say that immediately here, but he does say it as we continue on learning about it. But he did say it back when he began talking about this level of the Helam Atzmi, where he's talking about how mitzvahs, how the Kalim are higher than the Ur. And I'm talking now about, just want to shut off one sound. Give me a second.
It does say.
One second, please. So he did speak about it earlier when he first started speaking about the discussion of the Helama Atzmi that's revealed, which is the root of Gvura. Except there, he wasn't really talking the language of sweetening Gvura. There he was talking general transformation, and not just Havai Yechata Merivov, that the enemies of God are shattered, but they're also transformed. I'm looking at pages 1298, 1299, and on, where that language was used. And even earlier, when he spoke about how, was going back to see how far back he went, the Gvuris Mutakis started already back on page 1287. But before that, we spoke about how the mitzvahs today, the Yudke mitzvahs, matz, which replaces the Yud K. So mitzvah is Mem Tzadik Vav Hey. So if you remember in that discussion, that's where he brought Helam Ha'er and Helam Ha'atzmi at length. So it's only relevant because it's part of the real understanding to the whole concept here. I'm just looking where the first time he mentions it goes back all the way, I believe. Yeah, I think all the way back to 1274 or even earlier. I have to look it up again, but I think 1274 and even earlier. Oh, here, 1270. 1270 is the first time he really brought the Helam Atzmi. It's important for the whole context of what we're going to learn, so I just wanted to point it out. 1270. So that's a long time back. We're talking about over this, we're now 1325. So we're talking about over 55 pages back. So 1270, 1269, 1270. Okay. So now what we learned that to understand this, he brought Ketores as the operative example. That Ketores is this type of transformation. What are the Ketores? Ketores are taking a spice that initially, naturally, is bitter or sharp, dvorim charifim b'yeser, and they're not a food, and they could actually be dangerous and toxic, and they're transformed into a beautiful aroma fragrance, and that's what's used as in the Beis Hamikdash. So it's actually becomes one of the holiest forms of offerings, even higher than karbonis, as we learned. In Aveda, this is tshuva, the tshuva that transforms zdeinus to zochius, which is transforms the deliberate sins into merits, and that's essentially the process of tshuva, as we learned at the bottom of the page. Now, primarily it's a tshuva when it comes from the animal soul itself, meaning that's not coming the nefesh l'kis as thirsty as it is, or as much as it is distressed over the fact that it's distant from God. Nevertheless, it doesn't come to desperation of the animal soul that feels literally like its whole life is worthless. The words that he used, moyas b'chayav, v'reitz lahashlich chayav. So that's a very powerful statement to make that statement. So it's in that context, on the top of page 1326, that is the deeper level. That the animal soul, when it senses how dark it has, how low it has fallen, it awakens it in a very powerful way. And he brings the example of Rabbi Elixir ben Derdaya, who cried out to the point that his soul left him. And Rabbi said, I'm reading the last lines on page 1326 in the first paragraph, because this tshuva reaches primis v'acha shalamai legam mokara oyer. So here's the first time he says higher than mokara oyer, which is essentially in the level of Helam. But we're going to learn this more in detail as we go on. So that's what we learned before Yom Tov. This was our last class from on Friday. So I'm going to continue now on page 1326, the second paragraph there, the new paragraph. Now, just in case anybody who reviewed it wants to ask a question, I'm happy to stop for a moment, please, by all means, if there are any questions.
It's an interesting thing. This is the Gvuras Ne'epochim Be'etzem, but there is no, everything is Gvuras. There is no Avu B'Tanugim, there is no, all of these feelings.
We don't know yet. He's just beginning the topic. The next 10 pages are going to tell us a lot more. So I would hold up with that conclusion. Right now, it sounds like it's coming purely from the distress of the animal soul as it senses its darkness, its dark state, like we talked about hitting rock bottom. That's what it looks like right now. But you're going to see, he's going to start discussing. So then the question is, what then awakens the tshuva? Why suddenly does he get awakened? Why suddenly did Rabbi Elixir ben Derdaya at that point come to this? Is it purely hitting rock bottom, or is there something more to it? So we're going to learn about this. He's going to discuss exactly this point. Is it completely coming from the Gvura itself, or is there any other force at work here? So this is exactly the subject he's going to be discussing the next few pages. One thing he for sure said, that it's not coming from Chassadim. It's not coming from the Nefesh L'Kis per se. Even though it's possible Nefesh L'Kis begins the process by becoming awake, but he clearly made it clear that this is the animal soul as it comes from within the Gvuras. But I would hold up for concluding, because he's going to say a lot of things about this. So right now, yes, it appears to be higher than the Ava B'Tainugim of Tzadikim, because that was the second level of sweetening of the Gura. That's what you're referring to, right? Yeah. That was the previous level, where the Tzadik through the pure power of his nefesh alikis, completely draws down such a high level of chesed that it completely transforms the gvura to chesed. Now we're talking from within the gvura, which sounds higher than the tzaddik gomer. He's going to discuss this too. Difference in a Baal Tshuva and a tzaddik gomer in this context. Okay, I just wanted to make sure it's clear, Rabbi Shlomo.
Yes, thank you.
He's going to discuss it now. So anybody else want to comment? Any questions, anything, or we'll just begin the next paragraph. So now, page 1326, the pages can be found in ayinbeis.com if you want to follow along the text. So he says this as follows now. He's going to go back to the Ketores, which is not just an example, the Ketores is this level, where you take something that is on its own toxic, definitely sharp and very, very harsh, and you transform it into Ketores, like he said with the moir, that the moir, which is a chaya tmeya, a nikri yadua, and that becomes this beautiful fragrance. So, he's going to say like this now. Ayin Beis, and this is the of the Ketores that we discussed in the previous page. That these spices, samim, or these incense. I mean, sam, you can have sam moves, sam chayim. Sam is sometimes also the word for medicine. But basically, I think the best word here would be the spices. How would you trade sam chayim, sam moves? Yeah. So he says, these samim acharifim v'koshim b'yeser, that are the very sharp and harsh samim. As I said, I'm translating it as spices. Nasim l'reach v'chozak v'orev b'yeser. They become a powerful and very sweet and pleasant odor, aroma, reach, fragrance. Ad shemesha v'sanefesh. So now he's adding something he didn't say before. That powerful aroma, like smell, also has the power of shemesha v'sanefesh. It can revive a soul. Like when a person, let's say, passes out, you give them strong smelling salts, because something that touches the olfactory nerve has a way to revive something that shemesha v'sanefesh. V'yadua, as it's known, and it's known, da'ashavas hanefesh ha'idei re'ach chazak huma'atzmus hanefesh. That the return or the revival of a spirit that comes through a strong aroma, strong fragrance, comes from atzmus hanefesh. And now he's going to explain, this is coming from quite a few Maimorim Chassidus. I remember it very much in Teres Reish. Teres Reish is a sefer from the Mittler Rebbe on Rosh Hashanah, Saris Yemei Tshuva, Yom Kippur, Shabbos Shuvah, Yom Kippur. And there he's going to talk this topic, but from a few places. This comes from the Alter Rebbe. It's a very fascinating piece. So before, remember, we learned the difference between food and fragrance. That the carbon is a reyach, is an aroma, but it comes from a dvar meichel, something we eat. Whereas this incense, we don't eat. You don't eat the incense. You smell it. So he's going to explain now that this has the power to be meishav v'sanefesh, more powerful than food. He's going to explain now. Sharigam al-yedei meichel miseisav chayis hanefesh. Also through food, we increase sustenance and energy to the spirit. If a person, God forbid, doesn't eat, they get weak. And food revives us and strengthens us. However, and specifically through the aroma, through the fragrance in the food, that increases sustenance or energy. That's the inyan of the aroma or the smell of the fragrance of the karbonos. On the previous page, he talked about reach nechayach, which is talking about the offerings, not the Ketores. However, this food and even the smell that's associated with food, that draws from the source of life that extends into the body. It doesn't go into atzmus hanefesh. It doesn't go deeper into the spirit. So that's why when a person, for example, passes out, food is not enough. I don't know if he's going to bring that, but he's probably going to bring it. But the Mittler Rebbe for sure brings that, because food is good to keep a person on a level basis, to make sure you're strong, you're healthy, you're fit. So food is necessary and definitely gives chayas. But that's only for mokar achayis hamispasha beguf, meaning from the source of life as it extends into the body, not back into the engine room. But a powerful spice or smell that returns the soul, which means revives the soul from a state where it may have been in a weakened state, which we know already in Aveda, that's going to be a person who's fallen very low. He says that that comes from the core of the soul, of the spirit, that's far higher than the source of sustenance in the nefesh. So it's like something we've talked about a number of times. I just want to give an example. If, for example, let's say you can lift 100 pounds naturally. If you exercise and you condition yourself and you eat properly and all that's necessary, you can maximize your muscles to 150 pounds. But then there are times, either during time of crisis or a time where you really need far more strengths and resources, where a person can reach even deeper in the nefesh and not just bring down more energy. It's like electricity. You can dim your lights, then you could use more of the electricity and make the lights brighter. But there's a certain limit because it's coming from the same flow, from the mokar chayes hanefesh. But if you want something to revive something that was broken, let's say the electricity, the appliance broke, and you need a surge, you can't just go to make it a little higher or a little weaker or stronger. You have to go to a deeper place into the core of the soul, and that is the reach chazak that Ketores has. And he's going to give an example, like a medicine for someone that, God forbid, is ill. Or lomus. For a person who's deathly ill, God forbid, so you need a refuah. This medicine that you use to try to revive somebody who's literally terminal or dangerously ill, to the point of deathly ill, comes from very sharp and very powerful medicines. Asher la'adam ha'body, for a healthy person, these type of medicines, if a healthy person would ingest this medicine, it would actually weaken and destroy him. It could be destructive. And even more, there are those very, very powerful medicines that if the healthy person takes them can actually kill him, God forbid. So you see that it's not for a regular healthy, for a healthy person, they have to eat healthy and take the right vitamins and minerals or whatever it is that makes a person healthy. But when a person is in a mesukin, in a situation where they're deathly ill, you need to dig, you need something that's going to go deeper into their being, into their essence, that's going to revive them, something that would be dangerous for a healthy person to the point of even being possible death, God forbid. So what's going on here? How then is something that can kill a healthy person is saving a sick person? She says, because they themselves have become, and the discussion we learned that we talked about a bit, how you turn a medicine from a pure toxic force that you can turn it into something healthy. They've been transformed to become Sam Chaim, a healthy, not healthy, a Chaim meaning a energizing or an more than that, an enlivening medicine, Hamarapu Machayas Achela, that heals and mechaya and energizes the sick person, and draws into him mamish, like a new energy. So here you have spelling out using the example of Ketores and using the example of a strong spice or strong medicine, what he's saying earlier about what happens when it's coming from the Gvuras themselves. And now he's going to explain the Beruchnius. Ukamoyken hu Beruchnius, the Gedela Tshuva Shemevia Refula Elam. You see, Tshuva is great because it brings healing to the world. We actually learned this at the end of volume 2, if I recall correctly. In other words, Tshuva is equated to Refuah. Therefore, the example he used here for healing is a perfect example for Tshuva. So Lamaila, Beruchnius rather, spiritually, it's also that way, just like it is physically. Through Tshuva, the evil, that which was negative, transformed to good, like this toxic force that can kill a healthy person or hurt a healthy person, is something that is healing. And this comes from within the Gvura, from within the toxin itself, from within the Sam, the medicine itself. Like the Sameh Refuah, that's not coming because you mix something into them, like in the case Chesed, sweet water or something like that, but they on their own get transformed. Now, what does that mean? They get on their own transformed. The fact of the matter is someone has to apply something. You can't just take a poison and put it into a human being and it becomes healthy. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are scenarios like that. We really will, it will heal a sick person, but make a healthy person sick. Not sure about that. We need to discuss it. But here he says clearly, Shema Atzmon Mishapchin. I know he's going to talk further down. What does it mean, Ma'atzman? Because what causes it to happen? Something has to be a catalyst. So I'm not sure about this. We definitely know that you can take toxic ingredients into very beautiful perfumes, and that definitely can revive and heal a person. But when he's one, does it mean that in time something that was toxic can suddenly become a healing agent without any procedure, without any intervention, without any mixtures? So I'm not positive about this. I'm just pointing out what he's saying here. But he clearly says, so I'm assuming he means that it has to be not from an outside force, that this toxic power itself, when properly administered, will be a healing agent. Let's continue. We'll see where he goes with this. But if anybody wants to comment, by all means, it may need some research exactly what it means. Anyway, but going back to the Ruchnius, he says, so what do we know from this? Through tshuva, and the tshuva we learned before comes from the deep bitterness of how dark and how desperate the situation, that deep distress. So he says that's mamshich, chayes chodesh, a new energy, just like the medicine is not just like food. Food is drawing more energy, but not a completely new energy. From the inner and core of Ein Sof, like he said at the end of the previous paragraph, that's far higher than the source of revelation, of light and revelation and energy and revelation. Okay. So this adds to the picture of the Gevuras being sweetened from within. But like he said, it's through the Sherish. So their root has the power that gives them the power to be transformed. And it's not a transformation coming from an outer force of light. It's a transformation coming from the very, in this case, toxin or bitter or sharp some medicine. Yeah. Any comments or questions before I continue reading? No. Okay. How do we? What's the actual translation in Hebrew? Sam. How is Sam translated?
The slang is drugs, but I can look it up.
Yeah, drugs, but that usually refers to negative drugs, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe it is drugs. Who says this? There are also healthy drugs. You can have. Just wondering in Torah, how is Sam Mov, Sam Chaim? Rab Shlomo, how's the Gemara translate Sam Mov, Sam Chaim? What would Sam be?
I don't think Sam is drugs. I think Sam is something which is above natural effect, something which is having a unusual effect of the nature.
Like when it says in the Gemara, Sam Chaim, Sam Movis, what would be the way that would be translated?
That's a way. Something that usual you would not be able to reach. This is having something, a power which is above nature to bring it to you. This would be some Chaim, some Movis, both things. Some drugs are some Movis, but some I think means something which is not in a natural way, above nature.
I hear you. I hear you.
So I found something in Maseches Tainus, Daf Zayin Aleph, and it basically it uses the phrase Sam Chaim as an elixir of life. Elixir is also a medication.
Elixir, right.
And the same thing, it also uses Sam Mavis, let's see here, an elixir of death. It says...
okay, I got it. Yeah. Okay, so elixir is essentially, it's a drug. It's a medicinal drug. It could be destructive. It could be a healing agent. Got it. Okay. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily mean poison, basically, or toxin.
Correct, an elixir. Yeah.
Elixir is the right words. That's a good word. Yeah. Elixir. Yeah. I see elixir of life. Sam Chaim, elixir.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, good. So let's continue on. V'zehu ikar v'zehu, and this is the ikar aveda the Yom Kippurim, and this is that the primary work of Yom Kippur, the primary aveda, the service of Yom Kippur, was the offering of the incense, the spices. Lefnei means in Kodesh HaKadosh, in the innermost chamber, which was when the Kohen Gadol, as we recount on davening the Avodah, when we daven the Musaf of Yom Kippur, how the Kohen Gadol goes in and brings the Ketores, specifically Yom Kippur. So there's Ketores all year round, but Yom Kippur has this unique level of Ketores. The Liyas the Yom Kippurim, or the Yom Kippur, whose man tshuva, being that Yom Kippur is the time of tshuva, as we say, Ikaz man tshuva is Yom Kippur. Of all, even though Kol Yom B'tshuva, we're supposed to do tshuva all the time, but Yom Kippur is the feature. Its primary purpose is tshuva. Like the Ikerin tshuva kasher nefesh haba mitzad atzma. Miseder b'tshuva canal, and the primary level of tshuva is when the nefesh habam is the animal soul on its own gets stimulated to do tshuva, like we discussed earlier. Like you look at the bottom of the previous page, it says ikir tshuva boy. They said the ikir is tshuva boy. They say this nefesh habamis. Okay, so therefore, Now comes a parenthesis that's not so short. Let me just see how long the parenthesis goes. It goes till the word Ein Sof. I think, 1 second.
That sounds right.
Right. Anyway, bottom line is going to conclude and say, at the end of this, and so Yom Kippur, since it's the primary time of tshuva, and tshuva is about the nefesh haba itself, that's why Yom Kippur, the Ketores has such a prominent role, because the Ketores is not just like karbonis, but the Ketores has the power to go into primius atzmus hanefesh. That's essentially what the conclusion of this phrase. But he's not going to get back to it until we get a little further down. The parentheses, which I'm not going to skip, he's going to explain, so what's the difference between Ketores all year round and Ketores of Yom Kippur? And I should just tell you, this is a whole section in volume 1 where this was discussed more at length. The Rebbe Rashab is going to go back there now. But let me just make sure we have the topic clear. He's basically explaining that this idea of the Gvuras being sweetened from within is the Ketores. Yom Kippur is the primary work of the services with Ketores in the Lefnai Lefnim, because Ketores represents the ultimate tshuva of the animal soul itself being transformed, not through the divine soul's awakening, but on its own, like we learned, which is the idea of transforming the toxins or transforming the negative into the positive. Something sharp and harsh is becoming an elixir of life. In this case, far more than just food and the regular flow of life energy, which is necessary when you're dealing with someone who's in a dangerous situation, an ill person, also spiritually, to the point of deathly ill. Okay, so that's the point that he's making. In the parentheses, we'll learn now the difference between Ketores on Yom Kippur and the Ketores of all year round. Because seemingly, based on what we just learned, Ketores always should be this level. Because it's higher than karbonis, it's a fragrance. And frankly, the Ketores of all year round are the same 11 spices that you use in Yom Kippur. But in the Ketores itself, there's a higher level of offering, as we're going to learn right now. V'yeshlemer, shezeu ha'hefesh ben Ketores d'chol hashana l'Ketores d'Yom Kippurim. You could say this is the difference between Ketores that's brought and offered all year round and the Ketores Yom Kippur. So one of the key distinctions is where they were brought. The Ketores all year round are brought on the Mizbeach HaPnimi, as I mentioned in the last class. That is the Mizbeach, the altar. It's called the Mizbeach HaZohav. There was an altar that stood in the Kodesh, in the middle section called Holy. So there was the Mizbeach in the center, and the Menorah to the left, and the Shulchan to the right. The candelabra to the left, and the Shulchan, the table, to the right. Then there was another Mizbeach HaChitzin, called Mizbeach HaNechoshes, made out of copper, and that one was outside in the Oil Moed. That was a much bigger Mizbeach. That's where the offerings, animal offerings, were brought. So basically in the Kodesh, there were no animal offerings. It was only Ketores. Yom Kippur, on the other hand, the Ketores were actually offered and brought into the Kodesh Kedoshim. That's why it says the Kodesh Kedoshim filled with smoke, and so on. So it didn't remain on the Mizbeach HaKetores. And halachas talk in detail, the detail of how the Aveda went. So that's what he's going to say now. The B'chol Hashana Ketores HaKetores al Gabe Mizbeach HaPnimi. All year round, the Ketores HaKetores would be the bringing of, or the offering of the incense or the spices. Who al Gabe Mizbeach is upon the inner Mizbeach. Shezeu ba'Aveda. What is that in Aveda? B'chinas Primius Halev. That's the Aveda Primius Halev, like Primius Halev. The Mizbeach HaChitzin is called Chitzenius Halev. The Lev and Mizbeach are equated one another. So what's Aveda Primius Halev? B'chinas Re'usa Deliba, the desire of the heart, which is the inner part of the heart. Shezeu Ra'arotzin Poshet Shalamayla Metam V'das. This is the seamless, the shapeless desire of a soul wanting to connect to God. It's not as it's dealing with the animal soul, which is talks about sacrifices, animal sacrifices and offerings. This is This is like what we learned earlier in the second type of the sweetening. That this is the Aved of Nefesh Alikis, Ava Rabba, and especially Ava Betanugim. And in tshuva, what level of tshuva is it? We'll be in our tshuva, because remember, Ketores is tshuva, it's transforming. However, who says is the Nefesh Abam is the Nefesh Alikis. This is the level of tshuva not coming from the animal soul itself, it's the divine soul. And it's awakening that's affecting and impacting and transforming the animal soul. That's why these Ketores, when was the time that they were brought? When were they offered? They were offered at the same time when the Kohen lit the fire, lit the menorah, I should say. Halos hanedus. The pasuk says it explicitly. Actually, I think in this week's parsha he also mentions it. I don't remember, but he says when Aaron with the Kohen Gadol will raise the flames, which means light the flames. Yaktirena. That's when he should also bring the Ketores. What's the connection between Ketores and lighting the menorah? V'yadua. The Neters hem hanashamis. Neters indicate light. Ner Hashem nishmas adam. The soul of a human being is compared to a flame. A ner is not darkness; it's light. So therefore, neters are the level of the neshamas. U'ba'alos are neters b'chinas rotzim poshut. And when these neters of the neshamas are elevated by the kohen, that's which is the rotzim poshut, that the souls are connecting through their pure desire to God. That's when yaktirena shemesala gama nefesh abamis b'nichla b'kedusha. That's when you bring the Ketores that also affect and elevate the animal soul, which is the negative toxins of the Ketores. But this is not the animal soul in its own, is the nefesh alikis. The neters are awakening and stimulating the animal soul, and nichlal and benichla b'kedusha. It's elevated and absorbed in kedusha, like we learned earlier about the tzaddik gomur. That the tzaddik gomur is in chapter 9 in Tanya, which he's going to bring a little later, that the love is so deep, the ava b'tainugim, that it spills over into the left side of the heart and transforms it and elevates it. The only thing he's now going to qualify in his boile ale, but earlier we learned that the second level of sweetening the gvura, that it doesn't completely transform it because it's not ultimately from the animal soul itself. Nevertheless, compared to the first level of sweetening, it is impacting. If you remember, we learned that impacts it and changes it. When it comes to tshuva, so even though Re'usa D'Liba on its own is not a transformer, but when it comes to the tshuva that it stimulates, there it transforms the animal soul to good. So he's just qualifying what he said. You want to know where he said that? He said that at the bottom. Re'usa D'Liba, he said, was not Nepach Legamri. Okay, I have to find it. I think it was at the bottom of page 1320, if I recall correctly.
Re'usa D'Liba is not the tzaddik gomur.
I'll show you. I'll show you 1 second. One minute for this. That's what I was looking up. I think Re'usa D'Liba is one level lower than the tzaddik gomur. That's what it looks like on top of page 1321. Because tzaddik she'eino gomur also has Re'usa D'Liba. And I need to look into it a little more. Because here he's not just distinguishing between Rusa Delib, he's also bringing in tshuva. That even though it's coming from Nefesh Elikis, the tshuva is Nepach Legamri. Okay, it's not 100% clear to me. I need to look up. I remember there at the bottom of 1320, 1321, he spoke about it. I don't see Rusa Delib there right away. I do see it later.
Top of page 1321.
That's what I just referred to.
Sorry. Tzadik she'eino gam rahus sheyesh bo gam b'chinas ava rabbi v'usa lidish ois sheyema she.
That's what I just said. That it looks to me that it's a tzaddik she'eino gam. Sheyesh bo gam b'chinas, right? On top of 1320, the bottom of 1320 starts in 1321. She'es shini be'etzem ha'chumri. Yeah, he does say that there. So based on that, it would sound like that the tshuva is that the tzaddik gomur, or is it or even the tzaddik she'eino gomur, the tshuva that it causes in the nefesh habamis is some form of nepach. I think not, because that would be the first level of the sweetening. It doesn't transform it; it just overpowers it, neutralizes it. The tzaddik gomur transforms it. But regardless, either way, it's coming from the nefesh elikis. Avla Ketores of Yom Kippurim shulafnei lefnim. That was done. That offering was made inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, not in the Holy of Holies. Who's hatshuva shemiseres hanefesh habamis ba'atzmei? That's the tshuva of the animal soul on its own. And that's why it was done in the innermost chamber, because that's referring to the innermost core of Ein Sof. So that's the distinction between the two levels of Ketores. And I would say probably in the Tzaddik She'eino Gomer itself, there's a level of Rusa Delib, it's not Nepach, but the Tshuva, it is Nepach. I don't think he means the Tzaddik Gomer. Because the Tzaddik Gomer for sure is Nepach, transformed, but also the Nefesh Elikis. Remember, the Tzaddik Gomer would also be, in my opinion, also the Ketores of all year round, not of Yom Kippur. But let's see, maybe, I know he's going to talk about this more soon. So this may become much clearer in the next page, next few lines on the next page. Okay. Remember, Ketores is hisapcha, not like Karbonis. Karbonis is the battle with the animal soul. Ketores is transforming the animal soul, but the transformation all year round would be a transformation that coming from Oir, from the divine soul. And Yom Kippur, it's coming from the animal soul itself. That's the bottom line, what he's saying here. The distinction of the Tzaddik Gomer and Tzaddik She'eino Gomer is not 100% clear right now, but I think we'll get to it soon. So now we finish the parentheses, so he continues. Like we see. What do we see? That in Yom Kippur, something special happens. The Gam Kal Shebekalim, even the most Kal Shebekalim, it means literally lenient of lenient, but it means someone who is not at all observant, someone who's very lenient with mitzvahs. So it's an expression, Kal Shebekalim. Alter Rebbe uses it in Tanya, someone who's basically not following Torah mitzvahs or in a very light manner, so to speak. So even a Kal Shebekalim, which is interesting, even when you speak about a Jew of that nature, still you don't use a very harsh term. Kal Shebekalim simply means light of light. So he's light in his performance. So he says, Shenifrid legamri melakus, who a person who is completely separated himself consciously from godliness, with numerous and many sins and transgressions, God forbid. Sometimes chet and oven can be shegig and mazid, inadvertent or deliberate, but regardless, different levels of sins. Rahman al-Itzlan, he's so far away, separated himself, to the point that the light of the divine soul, remember we learned this earlier, that when it comes into the body and the animal soul, it can become completely darkened. So the light of the divine soul gets darkened. And more than that, v'nichba boy, legami Rahman al-Islam, nichba means like extinguished. What he means, obviously, doesn't mean totally extinguished, because there's no such thing as total extinguishing. But from a Gilui point of view, it's not just darkened, it's like as if it's not burning altogether. Completely. Rahman al-Islam, God forbid. So even a person like that, every day, even though there's Ketores every day, he does not get awakened. But even a person like that gets stimulated and aroused in a tshuva during the Ilah, the last fifth prayer of Yom Kippur. This is only due to an awakening that comes from within himself. How does he know that? Because why doesn't he get awakened other times? Because they're talking about the power of Yom Kippur has a power to touch that person in that core deep place that he gets awakened from within it. Now, of course, you'll ask the question, so that means Yom Kippur did it. So why are we saying it's Mitzad Atzmei? So the Rebbe Rashab is going to answer that question on the bottom of page 1328. He's going to ask exactly that question. What does it mean, Mitzad Atzmei, when at the end of the day you just said it's Yom Kippur? So it's not completely on its own. The day, Ne'ilah, has some power. So, but from all practical purposes, it's not coming from the Nefesh Elixir. It's not a force within, it's not a force outside of his animal soul. Whatever is happening is causing the animal soul itself to awaken. Like we discussed the other day about hypothermia, that there's something in there that always remains intact, even the darkest moments. So usually in a regular service, it's the light that awakens the darkness and illuminates it. But here we're talking about something that affects you, that the darkness itself, from within its very core, gets stimulated. That's what he's saying here. And as far as Yom Kippur goes, we'll learn about that. This too is going to explain. This is the inyan when we say Yeshaya. The prophet says, it will be on that day, Yitaka b'Shefer Gadol. The great Shofar will be sounded. But then it continues, it will have an effect on people. Ubo ha'evdim be'eretz Ashur, and it will draw and cause those that got lost in the land of Ashur, which we'll explain shortly what all that is. V'anidachim, it doesn't say this end of it, but it says anidachim be'eretz Mitzrayim, those that were downtrodden or pushed aside in Eretz Mitzrayim. So he says, Pirush Oivdim, what's Oivdim? Who kamoisher se avuda, shaleneidim akemakal. It's like a lost sheep that nobody knows at all where it is. It's like the story with Moshe Rabbeinu. The sheep got lost. So there's an expression, se avuda, a lost sheep. Shaleneidim akemakal. No one knows at all where it is. Since it's completely lost, it doesn't have the capacity to return to its owner, to the shepherd at all, forever. So unfortunately, tragically, there are neshamas that got lost in Golus. That's the Golus of Eretz Ashur, much deeper than the Golus of Mitzrayim. And that causes Evdim, not just Nidachim. Nidachim means oppressed, downtrodden, Nitcha, pushed aside. But Eretz Ashur creates Evdim. And he explains now, continues, the top of page 1327. How does such a state come? How is it possible for a sheep to be so lost that it will never return on it will never find its owner? It comes because the Seh Evedes Es Atzma, Shaholcha Shevava V'toya Min Haderech L'mokim Zor V'rochid B'yeser. Because the Seh lost itself. The Seh, for some reason, lost its way and lost its flock, basically. And when Shaholcha Sheva V'toya, these are very strong words, that went off completely Sheva usually refers to actually Shalcha Sheva Toya, meaning wanders off Toya, completely lost minaderech from the path. It basically wandered off in a very serious way from the path lemokim zar to a strange place, v'rochik b'yeser, to a strange and very distant place, actually nimtze mekema gam b'chipus gadol, to the point you can't find where it is, even with a grand search, even with an extensive search, chipus gadol, a whole search party, can't find it. That's how far it's wandered. And what is this referring to? He says, "V'zeh moshel neshamis shenikreis evdes." This is a moshel, this moshel of the Se'avuda, this lost sheep of souls that are called lost souls. Sheyatzu mederech hayosher me'elam hayichud le'elam hapirut. That they left the straight path from the world of unity to the world of fragmentation or the world of dissonance. Shaholchu shevav b'derech libam. They went off shevav, meaning shevav is like, sometimes you talk about murderers are called shevavim, but sholchu shevav b'derech libam. They followed their own impulses, their own temptations. L'mekemes hechalis hatuma. They traveled, these souls, to the chambers of tuma, of impurity. V'nitku shama, and they got stuck there. They became immersed there. To the point that they're incapable of returning to their Father in heaven. There's a very, oh boy, he's bringing the heavy duty stuff here. Like the Yisrael that nivla, get lost, get swallowed up, get absorbed, begoyim, by the nations. I think it talks about the 10 shvatim, the 10 lost tribes. Or the same expression we speak when the dream of Paroi, when you say, Ukiporos hateva shenivlu b'harois v'lei neda kibo. So we know in the dream of Paroi what happened. So first he dreamt about these 7 cows that were sated, they were filled up, fat cows, and then you came to the very skinny and very emaciated cows. And then his dream continues that the fat cows were swallowed up by the emaciated cows. Which means they got lost, they're completely unknown where they are now. So Yosef translated that dream by saying that there'll be 7 years of famine. That's the 7 fat cows. But then the famine will be, there'll be 7 years of plenty, the fat cows, 7 years of, 7 cows represent 7 years of plenty, and then will come a famine that's so powerful that it'll erase the memory even of the plenty. It'll swallow it to the point you can't even recognize. So he's saying all this are examples, as if they're completely lost. Are they really completely lost? Obviously, we know that Yom Kippur is going to wake them up, like we said. You talk about Shofar Gadol. The Shofar is going to awaken them. But for all practical purposes, without any effort, they're like as if they're completely lost. And that means they're lost at its Asher. Asher comes from the word Beriboy Hatagim Agash. Asher has the word with plenty, with a physical. Okay, but we're not going to stop here. We have to hear the good news. The good news is, and when the sounding of the great shofar will be sounded in the future, when Mashiach comes, they will also arrive and gather together, also these lost souls in Eretz Asher. And what is that naveda? This is due to the fact that the animal soul, even in its very core intensity of its crassness and its grobkeit and its increased, grobkeit, crassness, coarseness. Yiseder b'tshuva will also be stimulated b'tshuva. And in general, this is the Ketores, like we said earlier from Eitz Chaim. He said the Ketores is that the energy, the divine energy, is nivla. Remember the word nivla, swallowed up in the klipa. That's like the Ra. The Ketores is transforming it back and freeing it from being swallowed and absorbed. He mentioned that, I believe, on page, we spoke about the Ketores here, on page 1325, yeah. So they will be freed from there. I'll read a few more lines. It's known that a similar experience, like this great Shofar of the future, every Yom Kippur has a taste of that, has a similarity to that. That every Yom Kippur has a revelation of this level of the Shofar, as it says elsewhere, and therefore Gama Kal Shebekalim, and therefore even the most lenient of the lenient, the one that's weakest in commitment, Meseir b'tshuva b'Yom Kippur, is stimulated and awakened and aroused in tshuva and Yom Kippur. And this is the bringing of the Ketores and Yom Kippur dafke lefnai lefnim, which he translates what means inner, the inner. The elevation all the way into the inner core of Ein Sof, which also comes from that touches the inner core also of these souls. That's only possible in this darkest of moments. That's coming straight from the animal soul itself. And now he's going to say, "Uksiv ki ba'onon ere." In the cloud, ere, I will appear. God is saying, I will appear in the Anan Ketores, in the cloud that comes when the Ketores the incense is ignited, is lit. It creates a cloud, and that's where I will be seen. What means Ere? I will see my core essence. Here he goes. And this is the the core concealed state of the divine. Nimshal begili ba'anan Ketores is revealed in the cloud of these spices, of the incense. Through the tshuva, that the Ra itself, not through the toiv, that the Ra itself is transformed to good. Nimshal b'chinas hela ma'atzmi the ein sof shalamayim moker kol hagiluyim. That draws down from the core essential concealed state that's higher than Giluyim. So that which is lower than Giluyim, the Helam, the negative concealment to the point that they're lost, is rooted and can access the level of Helam Atzmi that's higher than all Giluyim, like I described. And now he says it clearly. What I said was that rock bottom, ultimately the fact that a person, that deepest concealment below, actually is rooted in the highest levels of concealment above, which can free a person even from the darkest of the dark. It's essentially what he just said right now. And here we'll stop. We'll talk more about it, but this is getting, as you see, he's elaborating and is getting a fuller picture. We're getting a fuller picture of this idea. So I'm going to stop here, like a third of the way down, or even close to halfway down, a little more than a third of the way down on page 1327. Any questions, my friends? All clear?